Hey guys, welcome to my office down near the river. Hope you can just watch the river go by while we talk. We got to get outside more these days. Quarantine is crazy. I don't know about you, but I've been thinking a lot that I have this sinful nature. And one thing about that during this time is I'm tired of my story. I want to get out of my story. I feel like this is awful. And where is God? And maybe you feel the same way. I think what's interesting about the quarantine and these difficult times is we ask the question, where is God? Where is His providence? We have this great term, providence. What does that mean? To me, it means that God is superintending His authorship over His story of creating this covenant faithfulness to us, His people, to always provide and protect for us. And during these times, that's really compromised. We really question that and we think, man, life couldn't be any worse. Where is God? Psalm 22 is amazing because it really illustrates how God is at work throughout generations, telling stories and weaving it all together and creating a master plan and having us within that. So Psalm 22 is something that David wrote, and they would have enjoyed singing it, especially during exile. A couple hundred years later, they would have been singing this during exile, acknowledging the thought that maybe God has forsaken us, but then still having hope and looking ahead. And then when Jesus came, these were actually His last words on the cross. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And He's citing the Psalm here. The New Testament doesn't really cite things. It's possible maybe He's said the whole entire Psalm, or that His reference to it would have made people go back and look and see that Jesus is really fulfilling this Psalm. He is the Messiah that they were looking for. He is the hope of the world, and through Him all the nations will be healed. So this really just illustrates that it's crazy that we're in the middle of this story, and yet it's so much bigger than us. There's always so much outside of us. So what the Bible teaches is incredible, like to get yourself in the story, to see the story outside of your own story, and to trace God's faithfulness through the generations. What I love about the end of this psalm is I think I counted in the last 10 verses, there's like 9 references to different generations, spanning all the way back to Abraham or Jacob and all the way forward to the people in the end. And so it's really capturing this story that from beginning to end, God is providentially looking out for His people, and He is with everybody, no matter their story, from beginning to end. What this means for you, I think, is terrific. I think it means that you're likely to be short-sighted like I am and say, woe is me, I'm in the middle of this story, this is awful. And what's great about the Bible, what's great about this psalm, what's great about this activity I want to give to you is we can go back and we can trace God's story throughout time. So we're not the author, you can't author your own story, but you can trace God's story. And I really believe that 99% of God's story we have access to. There's maybe 1% that is left unwritten. And that's what gets us bogged down, is this 1% of our story as the people of God, not as you as an individual, but us as the people of God is unwritten. And it makes us panicked and it makes us doubt God's providence. So my encouragement to you is go back and look at this psalm, study it, look at all the references, they're amazing. Look at the cross references as Savannah pointed out, see how they tie into the New Testament and the teachings of Jesus and His fulfillment of some of these crazy things. And how beautiful that is, that God is interweaving all of these stories, that He's providentially working through His Holy Spirit to provide clarity to this story. But once you're done looking at all of those details, I want you to do this. I want you to trace God's story, okay? So you're not authoring the story, but it's kind of cool when there is an author and you can't author a story, you can go trace it. I know I'm mixing metaphors here. This is more like art. If God has drawn something and if He's drawn something and mastered something, you really can't write over top of that. But you can go back and you can trace God's story. You can see His faithfulness throughout time, all the way back in the beginning, through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, through David, through the time of exile and the Psalms that they sang, through Jesus, to the early church, to us today. You can trace God's faithfulness and you can be renewed with hope and the fact that God is providential throughout time. Even when in your own little story it doesn't always feel that way or seem that way, we get so myopic within our own story. So here's my activity for you, my challenge for you is make a phone call. Talk to a grandparent maybe, somebody, an ancestor of yours who believes in Jesus. Maybe look up one of your favorite books or go back in history to a historical figure or event. I want you to find a story outside of your lifespan that might encourage you and show you God's providence, God's care for His people, His inner workings, His majestic story throughout time. So do that. Trace God's story. Be on His trail. You can never actually catch Him. He's unsearchable in some ways, but you can always be tracing His ways and capturing the beauty of His majesty. And as you do so, may you be renewed, your whole being, your mind, body, soul, spirit, may you be renewed with rest in God's providence. He is superintending and authoring this great story, and you are blessed to be a part of it. And may He fill you with rest as you search His ways.